Good evening to the community of Salmon, Idaho, and those of us or of you that are out there listening tonight. I'm Becky Schufelt. I'm a Public Information Officer with the Northern Rockies Team 2, and we're here to present the community meeting for August 17th, 2022. And the Moose Fire is now at 82,874 acres with 34% containment. Currently, we have 782 personnel working the fire. I just want to remind folks or let folks know that we do have another meeting at 7, and so we will do our best to get through the presenters that we have here tonight and leave some time for question and answering afterwards. For those questions that we don't get to, we will be following up in the chat later on tonight. First, up on the agenda tonight, we have Reggie Rokes, who's the meteorologist for the National Weather Service, here to give us an update on upcoming weather.
Good evening. So incident meteorologist trainee, Reggie Rokes. So it's been about a week now almost since we've seen any wetting rainfall occur across the fire. So last week we did have some rain falling across the fire perimeter, a lot of it falling to the south, but we did get wetting rainfall totals, generally a quarter of an inch, tenth of an inch, along a lot of the eastern side and center of the fire, but not a lot of rainfall ever actually fell to the western side, and that's where we've seen a lot of the spread occur the past couple of days, likely contributed to the lacking rainfall there in that part of the fire. And that said, we've had several days of very warm and very dry weather. RHs we've seen the past couple of days getting down to single digits for a couple of areas, especially over on the western side of the fire, where you didn't see that rainfall. Now this trend isn't going to last much longer. As we look at the forecast over the next couple of days, you'll notice that we've got one more hot day for Thursday, expecting generally 80s and 90s across the fire area once again, and likewise not a lot of wind. We've seen a lot of the wind the past couple of days only being driven by the terrain. When we get heating during the day, we're seeing flow coming up the mountains due to that air wanting to rise, and as we go into the nighttime, that cooler air wants to drag the air back down into the slopes. So that's why we haven't seen the wind, and notice we're not really seeing much in the forecast besides potentially this weekend. So once we start going into Friday, we start seeing our cloud cover as well as our rain chances starting to go up. Eventually by the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, we've got thunderstorms back into the forecast, much similar to the pattern that we saw last week with a push of monsoonal moisture coming up out of the desert southwest. And that's going to feed that chance for thunderstorms. So we'll be watching. We've only got a tenth of rainfall in the forecast, but that doesn't include if we get a thunderstorm moving directly over the fire, that could bring higher rainfall totals. But anytime we have a thunderstorm, that also means we're going to have gusty outflows and lightning, and both of those are not good when it comes to trying to fight fires. And notice that trend carries all the way into the beginning of next week. It likely won't be until the middle of next week that we finally start seeing those rain chances come down, and we start going back into more of a drying pattern. And with that, that's kind of it for the forecast, and I can answer any questions potentially later on.
Well, thank you, Reggie. And now we will have John Trapp, our fire behavior analyst.
Just hold that.
Hello everyone, my name is John Trapp, Fire Behavior Analyst, and it's good to have Reggie here. It's a little different than the evening news where a forecaster predicts over a large area. The incident meteorologist is really just focusing on the fire, so it really helps us in preparing for fire activity. The Fire Behavior Analyst's job is to look at the weather and the fuels and the topography to try to figure out what the fire is going to do. In the Salmon Chalice, it's a little challenging, more challenging than a lot of areas because of the complex topography. If we look at the fire that's now over 80,000 acres, it has a lot of different variables in it. There's old burn areas in there. There's different places where there's heavier fuels that haven't burned in a long time, or there's grass fuels, or there's sagebrush. There's north-facing and south-facing slopes. It all varies. So probably to best illustrate that, I can show you a few images from around the fire. I'm going to turn that on here. right, it's coming online. All right. All right, so sorry I don't have a great way of not showing you all my personal photos, but I think it's mostly fire folders, so I think we're good. All right, so looking at that first photo there, what you're going to see is one of the areas of most concern, I think, for the public and especially those running the river, is a view of looking at the Salmon River drainage as that fire moves towards Panther Creek. As you can see, it's just kind of moving in what we call upslope winds. It's not being pushed by wind, like strong winds of any kind, but as those slopes heat, it just starts to move the fire up the slope, and then you get some rollout, and then it burns back up the slope, and that's a typical pattern for the day. At night, when things cool, it switches to downslope winds that kind of bring it down the slope. So I'll show you, there's a video of what it looks like when it's actively burning. You can see the upslope winds are kind of keeping it in check there with the terrain feature that's on the hillside there. So that continues to make its move almost like a seesaw down the corridor there, the Salmon corridor. So let me go back into here, and I'll show you a different area of the fire. So another area of the fire that people are concerned with is the Beaver Creek area that leads into the Panther Creek area. So this is looking from the bottom up. These are pictures and videos from my flight yesterday afternoon. So fire has continued to expand and grow in that area and continue to move down and towards Panther Creek. And there's looking up. Out of Beaver Creek towards Panther Creek. This one right here shows the type of fuel that it's in. It's relatively short flame lengths and just kind of burning along through that type of fuel. So that is something that's a lot easier for firefighting compared to large fires like I'll show you next. All right, yesterday from the flight, this was another area. This was in the southern part of the fire, and in those two kind of horseshoe areas that we're seeing, this one was on the western horseshoe on the southern part of the fire. What you can see is it's very active fire behavior, but not wind-driven. It's just the fuels are extremely dry, and so it burns really well. But you see the smoke column just going straight up, which shows that we have an unstable atmosphere. It allows for rapid fire growth, but it's not being pushed, like I said, by the wind. So it's just a series of ignitions when there's suitable fuels in place. So one of the ways that we a variety, and Brandon will talk about operations and how we handle different things. One of the ways that we do that is through burn operations or ignition operations. So I'll show you one that was from today, and what this is showing is how if we have a control line in place, we can then light off of that line. That's the classic fighting fire with fire. You can see the fire is burning back towards the main fire off of the control line. This is a nice effect with fire in the background. So that kind of helps us secure those lines in areas that we can. There's another example from today. So if you saw some smoke coming up, some of that is the work that we're doing, some of that is the work that the fire is doing on its own. And we're just trying to stay ahead of it. So as we continue with fire behavior and what's moving forward, we just keep our close eyes on the weather, what it's bringing. The fuels are very dry, and the terrain is challenging and complicated with the way the wind flows through there. But we're going to keep our eyes on that. And that's all I have. I'll take some questions later.
And up next, we have Brandon Chakowski with our Operations Section Chief.
Yeah, good evening, folks. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. As I was going to start over here in Panther Creek at what we call our branch break, the difference in our organization here. But over here in Panther Creek, just a little bit south of Beaver Creek, like John was saying, the fire activity has moved down in the last couple of days, and it has approached today. There's the first two structures in the bottom. It is getting close, but at this time, none of our resources have had to take any action of burning around or protecting those structures yet. They're there, poised and ready. It's actually one of the hotshot crews and a couple engines that are in there, and it just kind of continues to move. And today's activity definitely was not as much as yesterday's. We got that, and then also in this area, we do have night crews that are in there monitoring that, and we'll take action as necessary in that area where fire activity has been increasing over the last couple of days. Overall, things are looking very good as we come down Panther Creek and hit the main salmon. That one nice line of fire that John was showing us there from yesterday, like he said, classic, moving along the breaks. Right now, we're allowing the fire just to kind of naturally move downstream and just kind of flank, and that really kind of goes with a lot of our winds that we have from the forecast and what we're kind of looking at. And what we don't want to do is get too much heat in here, so we're just kind of letting it naturally go down, and everything's been coming up and right back into the main fire, which is what we want. What we really don't want to have happen is for a column to come up and get too much heat and want to bend over the river and put something else on the other side. So things right now are working in our favor, and everything's going good. One of the large issues that we're having, and folks probably know from all the information out, is the road and the impacts, of course, to the main river road. Paramount is the safety of the resources that we have out there, and of course the safety of the public that would want to use that. Class example yesterday, as the fire moves through that real steep slope, the first several hours, up to 4 hours, there's a lot of rolling debris, large rocks, and large trees that will take and come down and hit the road. They're also hitting the road and actually bouncing over into the creek, in the river, excuse me. Why it's so important is we had one of our operators down there that we took down with basically a skidder and to kind of clear some rocks out of the road for ingress, egress, and he had a very large one kind of land right in front of him, about 3/4 the size of a 6-foot skidder tire. So that's a pretty large rock, and for the safety of that individual and others, kind of left that area, and we're letting it kind of do its thing as it moves down. Wait for that rolling debris, the pause in the rolling debris, to be able to get in there and clean that up. What we don't want to do is get anybody hurt, our folks or anybody there wanting to use the river road. Everything past the Pine Creek area is all secure. Everything's mopped up in the structures there. We kind of move all the way up through on the river corridor, all the way up to North Fork. Things since our tour here has been quiet, and it was quiet for the last several days prior to the last team leaving. So no issues, no concerns. Everything north of the river that happened in the about 3.5 weeks ago is all secured, looking good. We've had no reports of any issues there. We'll continue from the town of North Fork down the river, down Highway 93. We still will have and still get it daily some reports of the smoking cottonwoods over here in the lowlands, but right now there's no threat of that wanting to move off or threaten the containment of this line to where it would want to go to the east. So we still have no issues, no concerns. Coming up as we come down here, the Diamond Creek area, feel really good and secure. We continue to have folks take and watch that entire line, walk that line, and make sure everything's staying where it needs to. And as we come into this other piece and Moose Estates, that's where we have a lot of activity going on. To be able to pick this up and secure all that for the couple residents, the homes and stuff that are in there. There's also a large cattle allotment. There's still some cattle moving through there, so we're going to get that finished, getting that secured, and that little piece there around the Napoleon area is where they're doing the burning operations today, and it did get wrapped up like John was saying, so we're doing good there. And our next focus will be around over here on the east side, the west side of that little horseshoe area, to bring it back into where we have some good containment in kind of that Webb Dip area where it transitions into the Moose Creek area. Two other pieces that we are keeping an eye on is this piece here as it kind of starts to flank a little bit south along the 300 road. We're monitoring that pretty well, and as if every once in a while we do put a little bit of fire on the ground just to make sure as the fire up on the hill continues south that what we have against the riparian area and the road in the bottom, that we're keeping up with that so that any wind shift won't take that fire off the hill and want to push it down drainage and it maybe possibly across the road. And that is right now one of our main control lines that we're using basically to keep the fire from wanting to spread basically to the southeast, obviously a long ways to Salmon, but keeping that barrier right there. The other spot over here, as you can see from the shaded areas, the old footprint from the Clear Creek Fire of 2000, the other area that we continue to see heat in didn't burn in 2000. So there's a lot more of the variable fuels, that tall timber, that mixed conifer with a lot of dead and down. We're seeing some good activity there. And it will kind of run out of that fuel in a higher elevation when it starts to kind of get closer to that. So overall, things out there are going good for the folks on the ground, and we continue to keep a very close eye, especially on the values out here from the mining communities down there in the bottom, the power lines and the corridors and the road systems that feed all of those facilities out there that are still up and running. Thank you.
And up next, we have Steve Penner, Lemhi County Sheriff.
Good evening. We've been trying to, as far as the evacuation map, kind of keep it a reflection of what's going on with the fire. So it's had some changes. 5 and 6 we dissolved earlier in the week. I think everybody's probably aware of that. And then we have 14, which is basically Trail Creek to the mouth of Camas. And then we put in 15 today. So there's not a lot of people. There's a couple of private holdings in there, the mine and another one. It is quite a large piece of ground. It's pretty unoccupied. But that's, you got the fire kind of encroaching this way and that way. And it's pretty good over here. You're probably wondering where 11, 12, and 13 are, and they were actually some zones that we never implemented early on when they were struggling with the diamond line up over here a little bit. They had us, the fire chief and the emergency manager and we drove around. They gave us some information, and we came up with some small zones right in here close to Salmon. But fortunately, we haven't had to implement them or put them on the map, and it probably doesn't look like we'll have to. Well, that's all I have.
Okay, up next we have Linda Price, who is the agency administrator for the Bureau of Land Management, and she will be talking virtually with us.
Hi, this is Linda. I'm constantly amazed at the technology that's available to us these days. I just wanted to update on Morgan Bar Campground. We had it closed to the public and the boat ramp for the mobile retardant base, but that's been dismantled and the campground is open again. And if you have any questions for BLM, put them in the chat and we'll get them to me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Linda. And up next, we have Heather DeGeest, who is the agency administrator for the Salmon Challis National Forest, who's also going to be speaking with us virtually.
Good evening, Heather DeGeest, Deputy Forest Supervisor here at the Salmon Challis, and I am going to share my screen and bring up a map and go over the closures in the area. So you can see my little hand pointer up here. in the northeast corner of the closure area. This red is the closure area, so not the fire boundary, but the closure area. So this is North Fork up here. So the Salmon River Road is the north boundary of the closure area, and the Salmon River Road is open from North Fork to Spring Creek. It is closed from Spring Creek to Panther Creek. So open from North Fork to Spring Creek, closed from Spring Creek to Panther Creek, and that's because that's where that fire is actively bumping up against the road, and there's a lot of rock and debris coming down. There's an alternate route that you can take from Panther Creek. This route is open from Panther Creek to Deep Creek and then over Williams Summit. So Williams Summit, Deep Creek, Panther Creek are open. This stretch from Panther Creek to Spring Creek closed, Spring Creek to North Fork open, and everything in between on National Forest is closed. The exciting news is over here on the southeast corner, we've opened up, effective tomorrow morning, this road that's called the Baldy Mountain or Spring Creek Road. That road is going to be open for firewood cutting. It is open only up to the Ridge Road. You cannot access the Ridge Road. So if you go up, you're going to have to come back down the same way. It's just the road is open to try to get a firewood option a little bit closer to town. And then this Peru Trail is also open. So the road and the trail are open. The area around it is still closed. It's open primarily to offer some firewood opportunities close to town. So that is what I have to share tonight. I will also take questions if you put them in the chat. And lastly, I just want to thank the community and beyond for all of the support that the firefighters and the support folks working on this fire have gotten a lot of really nice signs and notes and letters, and just really appreciate how well the community has come out in supporting the firefighters. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. So we have one more presenter tonight before we get into our question and answer queue. So we will present our incident commander for the Northern Rockies Team 2, Scott Schuster.
Thanks, Becky. Hey, good evening, everybody. Scott Schuster, the Incident Commander for Northern Rockies Team 2. First, I want to say a big thank you for the warm welcome we've gotten from the community. We realize that we are now the Incident Management Team number 3, and this has been a long duration event with a ways to go yet. So we really appreciate the warm welcome we've gotten from all of you and the support we've gotten from the community. It's been great to see. So I just wanted to mention too, right, our obvious job is to do what we can to implement all the actions that Brandon talked about to contain the fire. But the other job we have is support for the community, whether that's working with Sheriff Penner on the evacuations, or as Heather mentioned, working on finding locations maybe where we get the firewood going, working with the BLM on the campground. So that's a piece of our job as well. And we also recognize, right, it's the peak of recreation season for you guys. And a big piece of the economy and the community is the rafting organization, or sorry, the rafting outfitters and private boaters as well. Heather mentioned the north end of the river road being closed. There's just, as she said, a lot of rock and debris up there. We took a shot at clearing some of that debris yesterday, and just some heavy, large boulders came down. It just wasn't safe. So we'll keep an eye on that on a daily basis, realizing how important that is to the community. We won't forget about that. And as soon as it's safe to open, we'll work with the forest and everyone else to get that open. it's hard to say how, we'll do it as quickly as we can. It's just hard to say how fast the fire moves, what the weather does, and things like that play into that. So again, we just want to say thanks to everyone in the community. I'll turn over to Becky here shortly for questions and answers. And if you need anything, we're available 24/7 through our PRO shop. So here's Becky.
Cool. Thanks, Scott. Okay, so now we're going to go in a question and answer round. So far, we've gotten one question to answer, and that is, why is the fairgrounds / Diamond Creek still in set mode with Ready, Set, Go when the fire is contained in that area? And I'm going to pass this over to Steve Penner, the county sheriff, who can explain more about that.
So that's a really good question, and this morning or around noon we actually met with ops and we talked about that a little bit, and there was some discussion of whether this was time to take this back to green, and there's a possibility we may do that. It may get shaved off. We got a little bit of this went over on the other side of the ridge, and that's already burned, so we probably need to pull this back a little bit, and then they'll take another good hard look at the line, and if they're real comfortable with it, there's a possibility that could change pretty soon. Is anything else ops would have to offer on that? So that's kind of where we're at with that. Thank you for the question.
Okay, so we haven't really received any more questions through the hold on, we have one more question. One moment, and we'll get it out there. Sorry, thank you for your patience, as we're still monitoring the chat to make sure that we answer all the questions that come in within our time frame. If you have questions down the line, you can also put a question in the chat later on, as we will be monitoring the post, and we will do our best to answer the question as timely as we can. So one moment, and sorry folks, we're still trying to filter through our questions. So we have one more, it looks like. Again, everybody, thank you for your patience. We're just trying to figure out who the right person is to respond to this question. So it looks like we have a question that Brandon Chakowski, our Operations Section Chief, is going to answer for us. So I'll pass it over.
Thanks, Becky. I just had to confirm, make sure my head was on straight with this one here, and it refers to the Cobalt Jervis mine, and it's actually on the other side of the Mudlick fire, a long ways away. But where we talk about that and where it may have came up was of us really keeping an eye as we look at the power lines that feed the various mine sites, and recognizing that power is important to keep all the pumps and filtration pumps for water, etc. going. So if that's what came up, we're not doing active protection in that. We're looking at where the fire is and possibly approaching basically the utilities and road access that would feed the various facilities such as that one. So no active protection on that one.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Looks like we have another question. Hold on one moment. Okay, so another question coming in that our IC, or Incident Commander, Scott Schuster, will answer for you.
Thanks, Becky. So a question came in on the number of firefighters on the incident. So we're right around, I believe, 800 right now, and why is that down from, I know the peak was maybe even as high as 11 or 1,200 before we got here. So there's a couple reasons for that. One is all the work that was been done by the previous two teams on the north and east side of the fire. The vast majority of those sections are in patrol mode, so we have a few fire engines that still watch that area. We patrol that by air, but we don't need near as many folks up there right now as we did, as recently as a week or two ago. The other piece of that is a little bit of an inflated or a false number. So when we transitioned with the Great Basin Team 1, both incident management teams, which is roughly 100 people, were here at the same time. So showed a bump. And then when we transitioned out and they went home, that looked like we lost 100 people, but that was just part of that transition phase. So operations works with our ordering and planning shop on a daily basis, and that number will fluctuate based on what we're doing out on the ground. We have, and Brandon could speak to that in more detail, but we have orders for engines and crews in the hopper waiting for fills, and some of those are on their way. Some of that will replace people that it's time for them to go home, and some of that will be bolstering our numbers for the actions we have planned going forward. So a variety of reasons for that, but overall the primary reason is that we got miles and miles of the north and east side that are now in really good shape and kind of down to patrol mode. So.
Okay, so we've gotten a couple questions about road conditions, particularly with the Panther Creek, Deep Creek, and William Creek roads. Those roads are open and in good condition, as we are aware of at this time. Panther Creek is actually the preferred alternative route to get around the closure on Salmon River Road. Also, we had another question about hunting permit for August 30th. Will it be safe to park along Panther Creek Road to access the west side of the wilderness area? The question is yes, but please keep in mind that with this closure, there will also be increased traffic on that road. So if you're going to park on the side of the road, please park in a safe manner. And then we had one more question in relation to where the burn is to a local location, and our sheriff here, Steve Penner, can answer that for you.
So the question was, how close to Wallace Lake and Williams Summit is the burn? So on this map, these are mile sections. And you have Wallace Lake right here, so you have one and then about a half. So it's fairly close. You're looking at somewhere between a mile and a half, probably 2 miles, somewhere in there. And then of course Williams Summit, it's quite a ways from, that's clear down here. So you have about 13 miles away from the summit. So pretty close to Wallace and quite a ways from the summit. That's all I know.
Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more questions coming in, but I do want to remind folks that we will continue to monitor the chat on this video. So if something comes up later that you have a question about, you can put it in the chat or give us a call on our fire information line. And with that, we will conclude the community meeting for the Moose Fire on August 17th, 2022. Thank you.